Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has signed the latest bailout deal, which calls for even more austerity on Greece. What are the actual details of the latest deal which so repulsed you as to force you to resign? And does Tsipras have party support? So in other words, they were signing off on that deal, you resigned, but now it's gone to an extra innings of repulsive behavior. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's not just me. The Prime Minister understands very well, and he has explained it too, that he has signed an agreement which is not viable. The terms and conditions of that agreement guarantee failure. So the question is, why did he sign it? And the way he puts it is because he had the choice between instant death, being expelled from the Eurozone, or signing up to an agreement that will buy him some time. Where we disagreed was in where this whole thing is going to end up if we surrendered, and also what would mean to actually carry on the fight and effectively utilize the 62% of a no vote that the Greek people afforded us a day before his decision was made.
Yanis, I heard you recently at the Kilconomics Festival talking about the whole history of this, and as you described it, the institutions, or the Troika, the ECB, the EU, those three came together. They were not negotiating from day one. They
were not interested in negotiating. They were only interested in crashing our government.
Okay, so why then come back and say that you're buying time, that they might change their minds at some point and become more amenable to some kind of agreement? They never did from day one. They never, ever were amenable from day one.
Well, I think you're interviewing the wrong person. Because I thought we should not have surrendered, I resigned. So the question should go to Prime Minister Tsipras. I think the answer he would give you was that probably he hadn't imagined that the great and the good in Europe, plus the International Monetary Fund, would be prepared to expel Greece from the Eurozone. And this is something that in the end he believed that they were about to throw us out. And that would be catastrophic for Greece, it would be terrible for Europe, but it was a risk he couldn't afford to take. My disagreement was that I believed it was an empty threat. In the end, they would not have done it. It would have been a fracture in the midst of the Eurozone that I don't think that the Eurozone could sustain.
As people have pointed out, the bailout was for essentially German banks, not for Greece.
Yeah, that was 2010. By 2015, you have to remember, Max, that the French German banks were made whole, so they were not worried anymore. But the moment you start fragmenting a monetary union, you turn it into a fixed exchange rate regime that goes the way that the exchange rate mechanism did in the early 1990s. It starts fragmenting and falling over in effect. So, but look.
Yeah, of course they were made whole, but it was always about bailing out these banks from day one. So, yeah. I mean, this was obvious to you, I think. So why wasn't it more obvious and they had a mandate, 62% of the people said, stick it to the Troika. So why go along and play their game? I think a lot of people you obviously resigned. You, as you point out, you're the wrong guy to talk to about this. You resigned because this was not acceptable.
But let me just be fair to Alexis Tsipras and to the people in the government with whom I disagreed. And I disagreed quite strongly. But in fairness, remember, the banks had been shut down by the ECB, and he had a gun on his head. Effectively, he was being told that the savings of low-income earners in Greece would go up in a puff of smoke because we will never allow your banking system to function again. Now, I believe that we should have called their bluff, but nevertheless, we should not underestimate the severity of the situation that he was facing.
Okay, so they're putting a gun to your head. You were on the Keiser report a number of years ago, and many times, and you thought that the policy was not designed to intentionally harm, that the bureaucrats were just hapless and ignorant. Now, you've sat face-to-face with them at the table, and you described at Kilconomics meeting these people. Would you still describe them as just hapless and ignorant and had no malevolent thoughts at all?
Well,
in other words, a lot of people benefited by the Greece crash.
I do not... Look, there's no conspiracy here. There's no attempt by the Troika officials to crash the Greek people. They crash the Greek people because it serves interests that go far beyond Greece. So, for instance, to them, it is essential that the Troika, like every bureaucracy, it wants to reproduce itself. It's impossible for the Troika easily to come to terms with its catastrophic failure in Greece than to admit to it. It's very difficult for them to grant to the Greeks, to the Greek government, our government, any government, that which they denied the Irish people, the Spanish people, the Italian people. So they have an ironclad determination to stick to a failed program. If there are millions of Greeks that fall by the wayside as a result, it's neither here nor there for them. They are not setting out to cause suffering in Greece.
And back to Ireland, because here you have a divide and conquer strategy where they laud Ireland and they destroy Greece, as you described it at Kilkenomics. That's not somebody who's just a bureaucrat trying to replicate itself and becoming bigger and bigger. That's a malevolence there.
No. Look, to be amoral and to be completely disinterested in the failures of your economic program and the human cost that it causes has an ethical dimension. So I don't want to let them off the ethical hook, so to speak. But it is important to also understand that they are not setting out to harm people. They don't care about harming people.
But the strategy between Greece and Ireland, describe it.
Look, it's very simple.
Describe that.
The bureaucrats of the Troika loathe the notion of a people who are empowered enough to vote in a government that says no to them. So the Irish government never said no to them. So they laud them. The Greek people had the audacity to elect us to say no to them. So they lambast us. They lied through their teeth about what we were proposing. They pretend that we didn't have reasonable proposals. We did. The only reasonable proposals on the table were ours. And they will do anything in their power to ensure that no other people in the Eurozone or in the European Union will ever dare vote in a government that will challenge them.
Right. So that sounds like some strategy going on that's beyond just bureaucrats getting bigger. But let's talk a little bit about, you were talking at Kilkenomics, something very interesting. You think at the heart of all this is the conflict between France and Germany, that there's a lot of...
Indeed.
Okay, so this is really the main show, and that Greece and Ireland are kind of in the periphery, caught up in the main battle.
Collateral damage.
So collateral damage, can you describe that?
Look, it's really very simple. If you go all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s, when the monetary union was being designed, initially by Giscard d'Estaing and Helmut Schmidt, who recently passed away, and then in the 1980s and early 90s, we had Jacques Delors, who put the blueprint together for monetary union. The way that the French elites conceptualized the Eurozone was this. They would capture effectively the creditworthiness of the Deutschmark and use it in order to extend to the rest of Europe or implement at the level of Europe their own policies, their own preferred policies. Jacques Delors was very clear about that. You'll recall between 81 and 83, Jacques Delors was the French finance minister. His reflationary Keynesian policies failed, and he realized that if he's going to implement them, he's going to implement them only at the level of Europe. For this, he needed to have the Deutschmark instead of the French franc. And the Bundesbank, understanding this, were always determined to crash any French attempt, Parisian attempt, to usurp the power of the Bundesbank. So you had this clash right from the beginning. You saw this in the early 1990s with the collapse of the European exchange rate mechanism. And the Bundesbank only accepted the creation of the euro in the context of German reunification and under conditions that would ensure that Paris would always be kept on a leash. And what we are seeing in the last few years, with the realization that we need a political union, is a clash between Paris and Berlin as to which model of political union should be implemented. They have not agreed amongst themselves.
If Paris or France has a model, it's not making itself present in any meaningful way, because Germany, since the introduction of the euro and with every subsequent crisis, their export market is booming because of the weaker Europe. Their ability to federalize the Eurozone is increasing because they now move in and they're starting to cobble together some kind of federation.
No, they don't.
No?
No, I think the opposite is true. In the name of federating, look, take the banking union. We have hailed a banking union in the Eurozone after 2012, 2013. But if you look at the details, it's a banking disunion. There's more divergence between our banking sectors now than there was before, under the guise of supposedly a banking union. We create the European Stability Mechanism, supposedly like the IMF of Europe, borrow on behalf of insolvent states. But it was created in such a way that it's become the European instability mechanism, and indeed it's not being used.
But what is the Troika?
So,
the Troika is
so
the
there is no
Bundesbank.
there is no movement towards federation in Europe. There is exactly the opposite. A common currency is dividing us. There is more divergence now than ever before.
Okay, but in that chaos, it seems like Germany is moving in to pick up the pieces in a way that's strategically beneficial to them in large degree.
Give me an example.
Just the fact that
I haven't seen that.
Well, they are the beneficiaries, obviously, on the currency side because of their huge export market. And
True,
as long as
that was always the case.
Okay, but
that was always the point about monetary union.
Okay, and
to keep the Deutschmark from revaluing.
Right, and so, but you also have Germany.
The federation part, I don't see.
Okay, well, fair enough. I mean,
it's the opposite.
Okay,
but look, Wolfgang Schäuble understands that there has to be a political union if the eurozone is going to be consolidated and rendered able to fight the next crisis, or to even to deal with the legacy problems that the previous crisis has left over. He knows that. But where the great disagreement with Paris focuses is on who controls the French national budget within that political union. This is what the tussle is all about. And we were never going to be given a chance unless we really took things to the verge of a serious clash. We were never given a chance because in Berlin, giving Greece a chance would signal to Paris that Paris will be left off the hook regarding the particular parameters of the political union.
Okay, let's, we mentioned some conspiracy theories that have been floating around and talked about, and so clearly this is now would be in the area of a conspiracy theory. So I'll posit it in this way, but ask you this question: entering the euro, Greeks were under the Maastricht Treaty not really in a position to do so. They had debt. This debt was hidden, apparently, through a number of transactions orchestrated by Wall Street banks.
That's overdoing it.
Overdoing, okay. So look, this is what I'm hoping to get some clarity on.
It's quite simple. In 1991, 1992, Jacques Delors and his commission, with the connivance of the Germans, came up with the Maastricht Treaty rules. By the end of the decade, it was clear that Italy would not be able to meet those rules. And it was essential. What was the point of creating a monetary union without Italy in it? Right? Because one of the reasons why the Bundesbank accepted in the end giving up the Deutschmark was because they had had enough with the competitive devaluations of the Central Bank of Italy. So Italy had to come in. Italy had twice the level of debt that the Maastricht rules, concocted a decade before almost, allowed for. So they had to let Italy in. And all what the Greeks did was to emulate some of the accounting tricks that they used in order to present Italy as a country that can be allowed into the monetary union, and Greece rode on the coattails of Italy into the European Union. That involved some swaps, including Goldman Sachs and so on and so forth. But the real reason was the political imperative to let Italy in.
Okay, now when I was in Athens and I spoke in front of a group of lawyers in Athens, who were putting their forces together to sue Goldman Sachs for 13 transactions that they identified that were fraudulently created to hide Greek debt, to make them eligible to enter the euro.
But they didn't hide Greek debt because all these swaps.
But it was not on their books. They did not declare this debt. It was opaque.
The Eurostat knew it. It all happened in complete openness. I mean, Brussels knew exactly what was going on and had given the green light. And it was a way in which, not just in Greece, in many other places, debt was taken off the books and it appeared as an asset. Right. That's standard practice of financial engineering at the time, both in the private sector and in the public sector. Nothing happened untoward in Greece that was not untoward in other jurisdictions. But remember, the main thing is Europe created rules that then it had to violate.